So, Motorsports Hall of Fame inductee, Tommy Kendall. If you could summarize this lunch we just had in one word, what would it be?
Free.
Damn it.
He's right.
That's not my real one.
Oh, no,
that's
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Well, what's your
I would
real
say
one?
it would probably be meandering.
All right.
Free's good.
Free is
pretty
really
good.
good.
Or if you wanted to go ribald, it would be cock.
I like how you say it with a whisper.
Perfect.
All right,
Awesome.
nice job.
And now for Dinner with Racers, presented by
Continental Tire.
with your hosts, Ryan Eversley and Sean Heckman.
Placeholder radio sound. I'm a driver. I'm very angry. This is the sound of a driver on the radio during a race.
What do you think I should order?
Welcome to Dinner with Racers. My name is Ryan Eversley, alongside my co-host Sean Heckman.
And we are about 100 miles out from our final stop in Atlanta, where we are finally done with a 30-day voyage that took us 8,000 miles across 20 states in Ryan's lovely Acura MDX shod on Continental tires, of course.
That's right.
And we have been traveling the country, meeting up with some of the coolest, most interesting people in racing, having a meal with them, and presenting that to you, the audience, for free, so you can in turn turn around and tell us we don't know what we're doing. But one guy who does know what he's doing, in fact, one guy who really doesn't need any further introduction than just his name, is none other than Tommy Kendall.
All right, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2.
See, I was secretly hoping you owned this Nissan Sentra, because the last time I saw you in your
I think it's
home,
a Maxima.
Is that a
It is
Maxima?
a-
Yeah,
yeah.
he went all out.
All right,
on the
yeah.
Maxima.
Excuse me.
It was supposed to. Hertz said it was going to be a Kia, but when I got to the slot, it was. I might have grabbed the wrong
They
car.
gave
I
you
don't
the
know,
upgrade.
but
No, this is the upgrade, right?
Thankfully, I did a walk around. I don't always do that, but
Right.
there's a big scratch on the deck and there's paint missing on the front bumper. I don't always do the walk around,
Sure,
but
yeah.
thankfully, I
you
did
thought
this
this one
time.
through.
Yeah. Wow. Well, fun.
Yeah, totally
Yeah,
fun.
it's the most fun thing I've done this year.
Right.
It sounded like a good idea.
No, we actually argued about it right before we left. It was like, hey, wait, how are we doing this?
Yeah.
Because I initially envisioned it being 2 trips, one up the East Coast, one up the West Coast. And Sean's like, no,
No,
we're
we're
going to
just
do
doing
this
it.
in one big thing. And initially we were going to start in Florida, meet you guys like right after Petit. And then I had a test for real time, so I had to go to Road America for a day. And that kind of threw us back a bit. So then it was like, all right, to make SEMA, because I leave for SEMA on Sunday afternoon, which is 2 days from now.
Yep.
I have to basically, we had to get it all done as quick as possible.
Right.
So we were actually concerned that we wouldn't be on time or we'd fall behind and then we
Right.
wouldn't be able to do Florida at all. So fortunately it worked out.
Yep.
Yeah.
It worked just for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's all,
So,
well, it's
there
my
you go.
podcast.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to New Smyrna Beach.
I've never been here
we
before.
we'd never been. We pulled in last night, and then just to walk this morning, because our hotel is literally walking distance.
Oh, is it the Hampton right there?
Yeah,
okay.
which is
That's-
nice.
That seems like the
and it's
best
clearly
spot to
off
stay.
season, because like it looks nice and it looks
Yeah.
like it should be crowded, but there's nobody in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the weird slack time. I always assumed Florida was winter only.
Sure.
Yeah.
But this town is actually more of a summer town because
Makes
of
sense.
Orlando.
Okay.
And so this is one of the Orlando beach towns.
Okay.
And it's the nicer one. You can't get to it from Daytona because the inlet's there, so the
Okay,
crap
so you can't come
doesn't leak in. And
Okay.
and the south end is the national park, Cape
Do
Canaveral
they call
National.
Daytona Beach the crap? Is
I
that-
do.
Okay.
I have to be careful. Well, I don't have to be
No,
that
you
careful,
don't.
but I
That's not
I
what
usually
this is.
so people don't think that I'm like total,
Yeah, some
I
total
always say
better than-
they say New Smyrna Beach. They say, where is it? I said it's right below Daytona.
Yeah.
And they're like, and before they even say anything, I say, oh, don't worry, it's nothing like Daytona. Well, everyone's kind of nodded except Ari Leyendyke, who said, what's wrong with Daytona? I've got a condo. I'm like,
Never mind.
What are you
Looks-
trying to say?
Looks good on you.
Yeah,
No, I-
no, looks good on you, though.
I think that-
Treadway sold it to him, apparently.
But you did a similar thing though with El Gallo. You did a cross country trip.
We did, yeah. And that was spur of the moment, but it was always an idea that I kind of had that I thought that would generate
Yeah.
lots of fun stuff.
Right.
And so once,
And
we
you
were
guys started in LA and went to Talladega.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were supposed to ship the car, and then the shipping we went with the low bid, and the low bid no-showed.
Weird.
That's the reality. Okay.
And then
what you paid
my
for.
bro was like, what do we do? What do we do? I said, well, give him another couple days. And he's like, well, then what? I said, well, if they don't show, we'll drive. He's like, what? I said, yeah, so you don't have a job? And I said, I don't be here for like a month.
Yeah.
So he said, will it make it? I'm like, we'll find out. And so we just pointed that mother east. and it was like about a day into it, I said, this is the best decision ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I remember, we put together a little video with that, and we went through some of the raw footage, and that car
Oh, yeah.
did so well going through. I mean, where was it? Nashville, where like you stopped at there. You guys were at a coffee shop.
Oh, Memphis.
In
Yeah,
Memphis,
yeah.
and like so you go in there or your brother goes in there with a camera,
Yeah.
and so you drive around.
Oh,
and
yeah,
this,
yeah,
This
yeah.
entire coffee shop. So his brother's getting the footage. This entire coffee shop, literally just the entire place stops and
Right.
watches this rooster car driving around the corner.
And a little bit of
parking.
dialogue, and
Yeah.
people like, what the? Yeah.
And he walks in, and everybody just starts clapping. Like it was just like,
The king has arrived.
yeah.
my people.
Were you wearing the mullet at the time?
No, the mullet was not installed
Okay.
until we got to Talladega.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
So you go between New Smyrna and LA? Is that
yeah,
that's
that's pretty much what it's like.
Why here?
Why here? I bought the condo here in '98, sight unseen. It was one of the better accidents I've ever done. But my teammate at the time was living in Orlando. He was trying to convince me to, file for taxes here and use his address. And I just said, I don't want to do that. And so he says, hey, I found you a condo. And so then I said, well, where is it? He said, New Smyrna Beach. I'm like, where's that? He says, right below Daytona. I'm like, oh. And so then he said, but they had a lot of money. He says, my mom owns the one above it. I'll rent it from you. I'll buy it from you when you're done. I'm like, sold. So I literally bought it never having been here, thinking it was horrible. And then
And you're normally smart with your money.
yeah, well, and that looked like a fail-safe deal. Part of that didn't work out, namely his promise, but the place, has gone up in value quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it was. And then I meant to sell it when my wife and I split up, and I never did. And then it kept going up. So it was truly accidental, good fortune.
Right.
So,
One of our Twitter followers said that this is the world's capital for shark bites.
shark bites, yes, shark bite capital of the world, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It's when I was thinking of selling my place, I Googled. I'm like, oh, that's great for resale. But as I heard one of the locals explaining to some worried parents, they're like, listen, they said there are some bites, especially out here where there's it's a little murky with the inlet and stuff. They said, but if sharks actually liked us, we'd have a real issue. He says it's always accidental. Doesn't help if you get bitten by one,
Right.
but it's always accidental. And
I'm
so.
a huge Shark Week fan, not because I find the documentaries compelling in the sense that they're well made. I find them compelling in the sense that it's ridiculous how far these shows have gone.
Yeah.
But it is I mean every episode always goes into how many sharks are really out there.
Yeah.
And we for the most part get untouched. So I'll
Yeah,
give
you think
that.
about the hundreds of thousands of miles of coastline, the number of people in the water,
Yeah.
the possible encounters,
Absolutely.
and we have that many. It
Yeah.
really is an irrational fear, but it's something about it gets us.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be more scared of Floridians.
Or butterflies.
Yeah, you stop that now. So I'm deathly afraid of butterflies. It's a little known fact.
I found out
there.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's never going away.
Wait till he goes through his metamorphosis. He's afraid of blossoming.
You're right.
So because you and I both live in Southern California, and for the sort of automotive and racing side of kind of your life, where you do a lot of commentary and a lot of arrive and drive stuff. I assume most of it happens in this part of the world, which is why you kind of need to be out here.
Well, you would think all the off-season testing used to be here, Sebring and so
Yeah.
forth. So in theory, this would be a great place. The way it's worked, and like this year, I've hardly been here.
Yeah.
Just when I think I'm going to be here for a stretch, there's like SEMA is in. I'm going out for
Vegas.
one
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so
right.
it just seems like things kind of conspire against. Whenever I'm here, I need to be there. Whenever I'm there, I need to be here. So
Yeah.
it hasn't really worked out. But the idea was, if I could. This place needed attention. It was a rental for a long time. It got flooded. So I said, well, let's go down there and live there. Let's fix it up. See how we like it. Stay for a year or two.
Right.
Actually live there so we can claim the residency legitimately and so forth. And so now my wife, it's a tough comparison because
Yeah.
where we are in California is very nice. And so she misses that. And so I like California better, but I don't like
Yep.
it that much better with
Sure,
Texas. So
sure.
there's a little bit of a standoff going on right now. And
Yeah.
so we'll see how that's going to sort out.
Who was the teammate that wanted you to commit tax fraud?
Well, until you framed it that way, I was going to tell you. You could, if you go back through my history, you could see which teammate lived in Orlando. But
If only technology existed.
Right.
What have you got going on these days?
very little at the moment.
Nice.
Yes,
All right.
it's,
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Okay.
It's I'd never complain about that any longer.
Yeah.
This year, I was supposed to drive that TA2 Challenger all year.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Because I did the last 4 races last year, and I was
Okay.
supposed to do it all this year. And then, when, the day after Pt.1, when they killed the Viper program, my program also got killed.
Sure.
No racing for Dodge, and so it almost got revived because it was such a small dollar figure,
Yeah,
and they
right.
were trying to piece it together, and
Right.
and then it didn't. So, I mean, that stuff happens. It just so happens I'm not sure I was ever looking forward to a program more than this particular one, because it was like,
yeah.
from an enjoyment standpoint, it was absolutely perfect. The
Yeah.
cars are fun.
Right.
It was a really good schedule. It was spread out.
Right.
The weekends are like club racing weekends.
Okay.
There is zero responsibilities in duties.
Nice. Yeah, you
And
just
so
show up.
I'm like, this is the best
This is
racing
me.
Right.
program ever. And then it went away.
And you're a Trans Am guy. I mean, obviously that's sort of where you made your name, and it's gone through its highs and lows. And so there's sort of this new era of Trans Am racing. Where does this stack up to you against sort of the golden era?
I mean, most people don't even know it still exists. I mean,
Right.
that's how far it's kind of fallen. So, it's when it finally died. It for Trans Am people, it was a real bummer. But I mean, this is kind of a decent metaphor for some of the other series that aren't like they used to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes things have to die so you can kind of have a clear
Yeah.
slate to
Yeah.
do what you need to do. Trans Am didn't really radically reinvent itself, but TA2 is. Those cars, they're like $85,000 rollers, and so now with the cost of everything, you talk to people in racing, they're like, oh wow, I might just buy 2 of those, see if I like it.
Yeah.
It's that kind of.
Sure.
And so it's got a long ways to go, and it's not like what it was.
Sure.
But from an enjoyment standpoint, I think there's some cool stuff going on there.
Yeah.
My advice to them during the time, and this might be a theme throughout here, but when they were thinking of bringing it back, they were polling a lot of people and asking what they thought. And I
Yeah.
said, well, you probably won't hear this from anyone else, but what I would do is I would create basically an unlimited series that had like 2 rules.
Yeah.
And it would just be a total arms race.
Yeah.
And eventually you'd have to rein that in.
Yeah.
But I think
But right
that's
now-
one of the things really missing right now.
Yeah.
And so
That's been a
I'd
very
say we've
common
actually
theme.
heard that from a lot of people
Yeah.
on this trip.
Really?
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people want to go that direction.
Yeah.
None of which are the ones paying for it.
yeah. Yeah.
But a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, yeah, get rid of all the crap and let's get back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bill Riley was
Yeah, he was
similar
very
to
big on that. Jeff
yeah.
Brong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, if you came to Trans Am right now, you've got these loyal people that are mostly club racers, essentially, that are supporting this. And so
Yeah.
if you came to them and said, oh, hey, we got this new formula, what I thought Trans Am should have evolved into, like in 2000, I said, what you need to do is say, what did Trans Am grow out of when it started, and why did it resonate like it did? And so my advice was, I said, if I were creating that today, it would probably look like a DTM car, and would probably have about the cost of a Trans Am car at the time, where you
Yeah.
could run them full season, double throwdown effort for $1 million.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's what and it would have more power than, as Dick Johnson would say about DTM cars. They don't have enough power to pull the skin off a rice pudding.
That's what my dad says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but so I said, if you went to the current people, they'd say, "F you, we don't have the money. We're racing," and so
Yeah.
you can't do that. So the total arms race, run whatever you want. Bill Hughes did this at Willow Springs. He basically had a super production series, and he paid $2,000 to win on the weekend. And you had Trans Am cars, you had stock cars, you
Yeah,
had. And
just
this
come
guy
and
says,
run.
"I'm going to put a sprint car motor in this, and I'm going to."
Yeah.
And so it was kind of cool.
Kinda fun,
So I
sure.
said that would maybe get you there.
Yeah.
To where you actually got some attention, and then once you had some attention and some support, then you say, okay, here's where we're
Yeah,
going.
now we
We're
gotta
gonna
turn
do
it
2 or 3
down.
years,
Right.
kind of thing.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Kind of build your customer base up.
Yep.
Did I just drink your water?
Probably
iced
you might
tea.
have.
I might have.
It's mixed. It's probably
Whoops.
Arnold Palmer.
Oh, wow.
geez.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Now you've got herpes.
Can't get it twice.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy solution to get out of, but I think BOP, and it finally hit me today. What bothers me the most about BOP, it's a little bit is that the power level is, but what bothers me most is it kind of undermines the key thing that attracted everybody to racing, which is
Yeah.
what makes a hero, what
Yeah.
makes a heroic team or driver
Yeah.
or so forth. And so now you really can't tell. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look really close, you can see relative performance a little bit, but it's sort of undermined. And I get why it exists, but there's got to be a better way to do it. So that's kind of where, and again, how did we get here? I'm not sure.
Was it like this in your heyday?
I mean, there was some. It wasn't like this. There was some deal like during my Trans Am run. There was always people bitching about the people that
This
were
guy's
fast.
cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This guy
and
needs
so
it, yeah.
forth. But when you get to rules, and NASCAR finally was smart enough to, when they went to the standardized, you don't hear any talk, standardized templates anymore.
None.
You can't bitch about
Yeah.
that stuff, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you really, it's. In Formula One, anyone that has a no equivalency formula, basically,
yeah.
you get rid of all
This
that
is what
stuff.
it is,
And
right.
So you need to have kind of this is what we run. We run, like in that Trans Am formula I talked about back then, everybody had a 4-valve V8.
Right.
From Infiniti, Lincoln, Cadillac,
Yeah.
everybody had a 4-valve. I said, you go with a 5-liter 4-valve V8 with some sort of standardized fuel injection.
Yeah.
And then you go.
Yeah.
If you're not working on the right problem, you're not going to solve it. And I think that's kind of one of my takeaways. I think the cars need to be faster.
Yeah.
And the way I always frame that is when I raced, a really fast street car had 350 horsepower, 400 horsepower,
Yeah.
and the race cars had 8. And now a really fast street car has 700, and the race cars have 5.
Yeah.
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 I couldn't agree with that more.
So and again, I get why we got there to some degree, but there's a better way to do it, and you
Yeah.
gotta. And one of my favorite things is the market's never wrong. Sayings the market's never wrong.
Yeah.
And another one is there's no right and there's no wrong, but there are consequences. And so rather than say you need to, you don't need to do this, but if you. And so I think in terms of appeal, you look at the eras that really excited people, and one of the common things is the cars were
Outrageous.
and a little scary and maybe
Yeah.
dangerous and so forth. So it's progress, I guess, as a race that one death is too many.
Yeah.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't have something where people go, "Oh my God, those guys are unbelievable," and I would never do that.
Right.
I think a lot of the fans in racing today say, "I could do that,"
Sure.
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
they
you're-
couldn't per se,
Right.
but they think they could, which
Right.
is what. Like when I went to Indy and I was trying to get to Indy
Yeah.
in the worst way, and I sat in the stands for the first time, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but I really want to do that.
Yeah.
And and so
Fontana for me 2 years
Yeah.
ago, same
Yeah.
thing. I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, to be blunt, you're a perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, you still have recurring injuries from something that happened, 24 years ago?
Mhm.
And you got right back in that car as soon as you were ready.
Mhm.
And I assume that's a perfect example of like we at that was an era where GTP cars were considered sort of their heyday.
Yeah.
And you got right back in and no one was bitching about that we had to do this or that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We're not going to solve it here, but until you're focused on the right things, and again, you're so close to it, and whether you're Scott Atherton or you're the head of IndyCar or whatever, you're so in. It's so in close, and you
Yeah.
got 100 things that you got to deal with
Right.
Yeah.
that you lose sight of the big picture, and so
Right.
But
do you think the landscape has changed in the sense that there's now more voices than there ever were, and that's kind of muddying up what the message should be?
it
To
could
a guy
be,
like
yeah.
Scott Atherton, now there's forums and social media and 17 layers of management, and that may not have existed 20 years ago.
Maybe. I mean, it's good information, but you got to be able to separate signal from the noise,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's one of the things that I've always liked about Bernie is Bernie doesn't. You really can't. It's hard, but you really can't be that concerned. And
Yeah.
you can be oblivious and not concerned,
Right.
Like some people are. But what you need is the right mix of someone that really gets it and really doesn't care that much.
Yeah.
And so,
I like that.
You put out a key expression there that Bernie gets it. This has been kind of a theme for us is who we think gets it in the sport.
there's guys that. I discovered, not discovered, but I was first made aware of Mike Skeen.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's a guy that, it's funny, especially with this pursuit of these sneaky silvers.
Right.
Why he's not in a car
Yeah.
consistently at Daytona and so forth. He's won. Cameron Lawrence, who's
Yep.
obviously coming on the radar pretty
Yeah.
strong. One that gets it in a different way, and he's not undiscovered, but like you were just with him, I guess, yesterday. But Jordan Taylor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he cracks me up. That dude is a total trip.
Yeah.
And, I guess thank God he drives for his dad.
Yeah, because he can get away with it, right?
Because, in politics, people talk about political correctness ruining this, that. Political correctness, if people want to know where it came from racing. Because,
Right.
I mean, it's just, and everybody says we want more personality, and they don't go back and track what happened to guys with personality.
Yeah.
Is they're unemployable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so people learn pretty quick. Like Bill Oberlin's a great example. Bill Oberlin is an absolute nut job
Right.
Yeah.
away from the track.
Sure.
Right.
With, I mean,
1,000 horsepower boats
the boats
and- yeah.
and the this and his bike. I mean, but he's almost like a caricature when you interview him for
Yeah.
a race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's plugging this and he's plugging that and he's plugging. I get it, but and so it's easy to say that until you go in and dismantle some of the apparatus that
Yeah.
makes it that way, which is a long. But again, if you're not focused on the right problem, you're not going to fix it. So
Right.
every new management group at IndyCar comes in. We really need to make these guys stars, and we need to bring out their personalities.
Yep.
Well, you want the same result, you keep doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And so they're right in terms of what they're saying, but they don't have the first idea how
Well,
to
and
fix
I
it.
mean, we deal with this on the client side of our business with marketing. People are like, okay, I want to be edgy. I want to do something fun. And you're like, cool. All right, here's an idea. Oh,
No, we can't do
no,
that.
we can't do that. And you're like, well, then you got to claim what you're doing. you know?
We've
So-
had guests on this show already this year that are like, okay, I want to be edgy. I want people to know how I am. And then it's the same person that we see on
Yeah.
TV or
Yeah.
read about. And you're like, oh, okay.
Well, yeah.
Well, when you say who gets it, when I saw that on the the potential topics, I actually, not to blow air up your skirt, but media barons, and
Oh,
you had
thank
to create a different company.
That's why we
because
asked
you had to
if it was gonna-
firewall
Yeah.
the screwball.
No, it's 100% true. 'Cause
Yeah.
people don't know that. Yeah, we have a separate company called Entente
Yeah.
with Adam Saul and Jill Beck, and it's for just that reason, so we can
Yeah.
have sort of our clean company and
Yeah.
and thing. Yeah.
So the Magnus press releases are some of the few ones that I read.
Cool.
The
Thank you.
24 Hours of Lemons press releases.
Yeah,
are some,
those
are
guys do a
some
great
of the other
job.
few ones that I read. And so, I mean, I try, like when I'm getting ready to commentate, I have to read the other ones.
Sure.
I'm just like, chewing on the end of a gun.
Sean and I have talked about this a lot, that some press releases, it's like they just changed the name of the track and the date and hit
yeah.
send again.
Well, we literally did that on a Max
yeah,
release
yeah.
And what my favorite thing is, like, it was like a November test report. It's like, what the hell are you going to talk about in a November test
Right.
report? So we literally just scanned a template of release and just filled in the blanks, and we put that out.
Yeah.
But my favorite memory of that wasn't that we did that, but we had a couple of people reply going, just so you know,
You messed up.
it looks like it's a template.
Yeah.
And you just filled it in. Like, I'm not sure. Maybe your PR guy should know that. Like, it looks like he left
Right.
it as it was.
Yeah.
All right.
Sean was helping
We've
me
won.
with some of my PR stuff back. I think it was like 2010 or
Years
something.
ago, yeah.
And we had a race where it was like we started 7th and finished 7th. And so Sean's like, what do you want to put out on this one? Because I'd been writing the columns or whatever and sending them to him, and he'd put it together. And I was like, I just wanted to say I finished 7th, and that's it. And so you click on the thing, and it just in giant bold letters, we finished 7th. And I got emails from people who are like, hey, only one of the lines came through. They didn't print it all the way. I'm
That's
like,
all
no,
there is to
that's
say.
all I was supposed to say, but thanks for reading it. It's like nothing to talk about.
And Bernie is sort of my hero of guys that get it.
Yeah.
Bill France Jr. was one of these guys, and Bill France Jr. was kind of the perfect, archetype where he really did. He was in the garage area. He talked to a lot of people, but he never got it confused that you're actually in charge. So it wasn't the tail wasn't going to wag the dog, but I actually do want to know what everyone's thinking,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to make this call. So, and Bernie, I think. Bernie just has sort of an innate, gut. I think with Bernie, it's a lot of it's just gut.
Yeah.
He really knows what, and then he also has an incredible sense at whether it's poker or whatever. He's just 3 steps ahead of everyone.
Yeah, right.
I guarantee you, every time he sold his company, he knew he was going to be able to buy it back cheaper several years later. And so, as he was doing it, he's like, "You are an idiot."
Yeah, exactly.
As he's shaking the guy's hand.
But I look at a guy like you who's managed to sort of make this whole thing work, and you and I had lunch years ago, and you threw out a philosophy that I had never heard and have absolutely not adapted whatsoever, but I was like, that's freaking awesome that you would do that. You said when you were younger, you used to work all the time, try to make all the money you could, and then you sort of hit a point where like, okay, this is what I need to do to sort of make things work for a year, and I want to work as few days as possible to get there. And I was like, I've literally never heard anybody say that, and that's amazing. So how do you make things work right now for yourself? Because you're out of the car, you're only broadcasting every now and then.
Well, I mean, everybody says they want to slow down or they want to focus on the things that are important or this.
Right.
that.
No, I've never said that.
Never happens. And so, part of it was that. I mean, I when I stopped racing, I was cooked.
Yeah.
I was fried. So, and so part of the recovery there and just what do I want to do? And so I kind of said, listen, I only want to work for people that I like, doing stuff that I enjoy. And now that's a decent, if you're really committed, that's a decent recipe for not working.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so,
I know.
especially in this biz. But then the other part of it was kind of just econ, supply and demand. Literally, you know, it was exactly that. I said, what do I need per year, kind of? And I said, I want to try to make that in as few days as possible.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're way over that, it was 75 days was what my target was. And so I said, you know, if you're way over that, you're not charging enough money.
Yeah.
And if you're below that, you're charging too much money.
Yeah.
So more or less. And so, you know, I kind of just said, I'm gonna do this. Now, this year I worked about 20 days. So so I guess I'm charging too much money.
Roughing it, man.
But it was this year, the blessing was it allowed me to get caught up on all this stuff. And that was kind of like, as TV sort of eroded in, when I was doing the IndyCar stuff, people were making a good amount of money, they were making less, and they were less. And so everybody used to just say, I'm not working for that.
Yeah.
And then when it came time, you find out everybody except you, so everybody said it, and you were the only one that actually meant it.
Yeah,
Right.
And so, but I just said, I'd rather be at home than they're bitching that I'm only making whatever this
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah.
And so, money's not the only thing, but that is, you compare it, there's a, opportunity cost is a economic term where it's not just dollar, but what is this costing me in terms of what I'm not able to do?
Yep.
And
it's a huge problem for us, so I get that.
Yeah, and so I just said, so this year it's allowed me, I've gotten some of my vintage cars, my old race cars that have been socked away for 25 years out, and they're back with Dan Binks in Michigan.
Oh, cool.
And
Nice.
so getting some of those ready. Now, the fact that it takes money to run them, and I'm not working right now, so that's if I'm going to do any racing, then I might have to bump up to 100 days kind of thing, or make that work. But I just
The tough life.
Ever since I stopped racing, I literally haven't pursued any work.
Yeah.
And so all the stuff that's come along, which has been a lot of good stuff, has been serendipitous. And so, and that's worked pretty well. I might have to go back to, I might have to tweak it a little bit, do a little more meditating or something, because it's not, 20 days is not enough to pay the bills. Fortunately, I've got some money in the bank, and so I always tell people, I said, I can't not work forever, but I can not work for a little while, and I can be a little bit choosy and so forth. And so now, if I'd kept living the way I was living when I was racing, I couldn't. That's what changed a lot of us to what we have to do. You get all these obligations. I remember a CEO of AOL during the go-go days of AOL saying, he says, when one of my guys buys an airplane or a big house, he says, I smile because I know that guy's not quitting anytime soon.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
You know how that is.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
with the jet that we had to get out here.
Right.
So
Right. Millions of dollars.
Exactly. It's a lot of monster that I have to buy.
Sarah
So,
Fisher has a Ferrari, we learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
she does not. She's like her sponsors are like, is your Ferrari in the garage? She's like, I don't have a Ferrari. We have an Indy car. Yeah.
So how are you making it work right now? So you do a little bit of broadcast, you do a lot in stock market and that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's what I really enjoy, the investment stuff.
Yeah.
And so now certain years, like this year has been a choppy year. So I've been out of the market almost all year. So, so that helps. I mean, I do some commentating for the long races for Fox. My test drive show that's been going for 12 years, that's slowed to almost a trickle.
Yeah.
There's some changes going on there.
Where's that on right now?
It's on Fox Sports 1.
It still is on Fox Sports.
Yeah. So, there's always people pitching stuff and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so there is some TV stuff in the works. I have some, some rental property, real estate, which, it's in California. So it's been, good to me in terms of money or net worth, so to speak. But again, you can't pay the bills with equity.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you can, I guess. But so a little bit, all this stuff allows me to kind of, be a little more flexible. And so if you have a couple years where you're not working like this is new.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to rein it in and get under the 75 days.
Yeah.
This, with that race program going away and so forth, that's kind of, created a bit of a void this year.
Yeah.
And at the start of the year, I didn't have a single thing going. I said, 80% of me hopes it stays this way all year.
Yeah.
Because I said, I've got all this stuff that I want to get caught up on.
Yeah.
And it'll never happen unless. And so, the middle of my year got kind of busy, with through the middle of the summer and so forth. So it was about right. So, the investment stuff is what I like the best. And
Yeah.
if it were up to me, I would cash in all my chips on the real estate and all that stuff and just be really liquid. Because real estate, you can't make money on the short side.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
only make it going long.
Right.
And so I think we're going to have another pretty bumpy period. It might be a really bumpy
Yep.
period relatively soon, and I'd like to be able
Especially
to
where we're at. Yeah.
I'd like to be able to make some money on the short side rather than
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
grit your teeth and say ah
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
and hang on. So so anyways, that's I'm fortunate. And then if you sort of edit it down to where you don't need all the bells and whistles,
Yeah.
you really don't need much to live on. And
Yeah.
so I'm lucky in that regard.
Good
So-
advice though for young drivers, or people in the sport. Like, think long term.
Yep.
Because, like you said, if you lived the way you lived when you were in the heyday,
Yeah.
it'd be pretty pricey, right?
Yeah, no, it's that's fortunately I was always one that totally stretched for the house.
Yeah.
And it was in good neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so that can work out, but it can also not work out,
Sure.
depending on how the timing. I mean, if apart from young drivers, the one thing that would transform people's lives in this country, period, is money in the bank. And
Yeah.
and so, someone explained to me there's only two ways to make money: capital and labor. And if you've got no capital, no money in the bank,
Right.
it's all labor. You
Yep.
can never stop working.
Yeah.
So
Weird. Can't relate.
The story of Sean Heckman.
it's easier said than done, but I always use, Korean immigrants or Vietnamese immigrants.
I pay a lot of
as
attention to
this. I know you do.
So.
But if you think about it, people says, well, how do you save money? You can't save money. I'm not saying it's easy to save money,
Yeah.
but these people come here, they don't speak the language, they don't have two nickels to rub together, and 20 years later, they own 2 apartment buildings,
Right.
this, that, and the other. So I don't know how they're doing it. I know it's not easy, but I know it's possible.
Yeah.
And so, the ultimate luxury really is some money in the bank, and so everyone likes the nice stuff, but there's kind of a balance there. And if you save for a while, then it starts snowballing, and then you can't spend it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you're married now.
Yes.
So back to marriage or whatever it is.
Yes.
But when I don't know if we should even make this public, but a few years ago I had the pleasure of driving El Gallo Grande. And I don't know if we want people knowing other people have driven it.
Sean's afraid
But
that you're going to now
like,
get hit up
like
to drive
17
the
of your
car.
friends like, I want to drive it. It's like, I don't know if that should be out there. But there was something I was not prepared for driving that, which was you have it, basically the keys are located at a hotel in the Santa Monica area, and you park it a couple blocks away.
Yeah.
And the walk from parking it to taking the key back, there were no less than 3 different women that came up to talk to me about that car.
Yeah.
I had no idea the car had that kind of influence.
Yeah, no,
Is that-
that car is total rock star. I mean,
Yeah.
the car is total rock star, and his fame has surpassed mine by a long stretch. And
Was he in a Target commercial?
I was in a Target commercial, was in an LA Times commercial, a McDonald's commercial.
I saw it in the McDonald's commercial,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. So no, he is the ultimate badass.
Yeah,
I mean, the
I just didn't
charisma,
realize with the ladies that car worked as well as it did.
well,
It's an icebreaker.
Yeah, no
I mean,
kidding.
you're a good-looking guy.
Oh yeah,
so
right.
they just need
So-
the in. They're so
yeah.
nervous.
Yeah, well, with an intimidating guy like me.
Exactly.
So-
Apparently, sometimes size does matter.
Quote of the show.
This is the theme.
I actually along those lines. This isn't about the power of the female with the females, but the probably the best El Gallo evening. It was multiple stories, and this is kind of what happens every time you take it out. At first, it used to blow me away. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah.
Now I know what's going to
Now
happen,
it's just sort of
and
part
now
of
it's
the
just
process.
where
Which way
is
is it
where is
coming?
it coming from? And so. My brother just picked it up last night. He's taking
Okay.
his girls out for Halloween.
Well,
And
what's better car for that? Yeah.
And he's like, this thing is simply the best.
Yeah.
And so a buddy of mine was dating this girl, and he says, hey, I want to take my new girl to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles.
Oh, yeah.
In El
And what better
Gallo.
car, yeah.
And so I said, okay, let's figure out a date and so forth. And so I
Yeah.
went. He was living up in Sunset Plaza. And so I picked he and his girl up, and we go to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. And this was the one.
Which
that
one
was
is this?
The one on Gower.
Oh, that's in the good part of town.
Yeah.
Copy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say
that's
that.
where it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we go there, and we pulled up right out front.
Yeah.
And had the clock going.
Yep.
And
Yeah, there is a speaker system where it's playing. Yeah, exactly.
And so inside they were dying. So we roll into this place. We're the only white folks in this place.
Yeah.
And the hostess was she was almost suffocating. She was
Right.
laughing so hard.
Right.
And she's like, you got to come back for on these days because the maitre d' on that day pop a cap. I said, Pop. They said,
Pop a
yeah.
cap.
And she was saying it so fast, I didn't know what she was saying. She
Thank
said,
you.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
pop a cap. Got to see that. And so his name was Papa Cap. And so first it was Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, but on the way back we're driving down Sunset. And there's, and when you're in it for a while, after a while, you forget you're in the car. And you just start talking this, that, and the other. And there are these two girls on this Harley that were kind of next to a stoplight. And we're like, whatever, look at those two chicks on the Harley. But it was a Sportster. And then, and then finally the guy I'm with goes, those aren't chicks. That's Marilyn Manson. And we look next door, and Marilyn Manson is giving us the total thumbs up. He's like, that is freaking badass.
Yes.
And I'm like, he knows.
He gets it.
He gets it. So then I drop these guys off. I'm coming, and now I'm driving home. And the best part of driving that car is when you're by yourself. It's a little bit, it's a good test because you got to man up when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Because people think you're just a total nut job.
Yeah.
And you are, arguably. And so I'm driving. It's sunset. It's about midnight. It's gridlock. It's Friday or Saturday night. I'm in gridlock, and then I forget I'm driving along. I'm in traffic. I'm waiting, and these three dudes pull up next to me in this jacked up Bronco, musclehead dudes. And so the guy goes, I don't get it. Speaking of who gets it, right?
Right.
So and so I just kind of shrugged and gave him a
Yeah.
and then go along, and then we're next to him again, and he's like, hey, I'm like, look over, he's like, I don't get it. So I'm like, well,
yeah.
what are we gonna do?
Continue.
And so, but he just won't let it go, and his buddies are yucking it up, whatever. So we get a little further, and then one more time he's like, hey. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I don't get it. You selling something? I said, yeah, cock. Get it? And he just eyes forward.
Right. Like, oh. You win.
What iteration are we in now? Is this the second?
That's
third?
2.0.
Okay, it's 2.0.
Yeah,
2.0.
2.0. The original got rear-ended, parked on the street,
right.
and totaled. And so my brother found. I like that it's an Oldsmobile. A lot of people think it's a Cadillac, but I like that it's an Olds. Before even Olds went out of business because it was oddball, and now that Olds is out of business, it's better. So, so he lives on the street, and now he's living at that hotel.
Like you park him on the sidewalk or no issues.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because everyone's like on Halloween he'd get egged, and I'm like, I'm like, that's actually cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so, but I mean, we could go on and on. One day I came out of my apartment. They eventually renamed the apartment building I was living in after the car.
Really?
Yeah. At first, the people bought the building. They didn't like it. Some tenants were moving in, and they're like,
what is
"Hey,
this?
what's the deal with the car?" They're like, "Oh, don't worry, it won't be there long." And they're like, "Whoa, what do you mean?" They said the only reason we're moving in here is because of that car. They're like, "You like it?" They're like, "The only reason we're moving in here is because of that car." And so the landlords did a total 180, and they. And so they renamed it El Gallo Cubano. They have a thing about
Cuba.
Whole thing. And so, but one day I come out, and there's this car in the driveway, and you know how when you're someplace you're not supposed to be, you think everybody knows you're not supposed to be there.
Yeah,
but I didn't even notice there's a car, and all of a sudden they rolls the window down, and the lady goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move in a second." I'm like, "No, knock yourself out." They said, "My kid just says we come look at the car every day. We have to come see the car every day." and I said, "Knock yourself out, climb on it, take pictures, whatever. It's to be enjoyed." Who was it? Helen Hunt.
No
way.
kidding.
Yeah, Helen Hunt.
Oh, wow.
So the appeal is universal.
We could talk about this car all day, and we won't. But
I found that.
He's getting his grub on.
Yeah, good.
we'll let
love
you
that
eat.
car.
But does it? It's not a chicken, and and it's the most commonly thing is the chicken card. Is that that's got to get old after a while?
Yeah, it bothers him more than me. But people say, "Oh, I'm going to fry that thing up." I said, I'll warn you. Good luck. That's the baddest mother in this whole town.
Total change of gears, but something I was thinking about when I was pissing is we haven't had we had a couple of NASCAR folks lined up for different reasons that it didn't work out this year. So we haven't had a lot of NASCAR presence. I think people forget that there was a time where you were one of those road course ringer guys, and you did run, a handful of races that didn't quite work out.
Why'd you laugh?
Would-haves and could-haves.
Well, like I remember a perfect
Yeah.
example is that you and I went to we were both at a late model test for our buddy Oriole, who was kind of taking a test at stock car stuff, and you were telling the stories of how you tried to qualify for a bunch of oval races, and it was really tough getting up to speed that quickly in that category. How do you think NASCAR has changed over the years?
Wow. I mean, it's the biggest area, and I just heard someone talk about this. I think it was maybe Mark Martin. I mean, one of the big things is what it takes to be a winning driver, and this has probably happened in other types, but it's probably most dramatic in NASCAR. When I was doing that, there was no such thing as an engineer, really in racing hardly.
Yeah.
But especially, well, there were some in the GTP, and we had Doug Louth at Roush. He was an intern when he was in college, and then we got out, we hired him, and he is now the head of engineering for Pratt & Miller.
There you
And
go.
oversees 70 engineers, but or more than that maybe. But back in the day, what used to make you a winner in Cup was basically as much crew chief as it was a driver.
Yeah.
And you talk to any of the guys that won consistently, Mark, Rusty, Dale Sr. for sure. It was they could tell you setup really in depth.
Yeah.
And so and like when I ran IROC, I would at the start of every IROC race from practice, I would be the fastest guy in practice.
Yeah.
I'd get there a week early and I'd run. And those cars were enough different that and the Cup guys would do 2 laps because they wouldn't let them start the race without doing 2
they
laps.
just do the
So
minimum.
they'd come over and they'd do 2 laps, and then
back to their
I'd
day
say
job.
okay, and I'd get on pace. But what I couldn't do is I couldn't adjust in traffic. I couldn't adjust as the fuel load changed.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I learned to drive this way,
Yeah.
which is what you do in road racing mostly.
Right.
And so and just do that times 10 on a 500-mile race,
Yeah.
night to dark, this, that, and the other. And so part of it was just experience in terms of how the race evolves, and part of it was how do you keep this car in the window when all that's happening. And so that if you think about it, there were only 2 guys in the era, kind of right before this era, that won races before probably their 5th year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really good guys. Dale Jarrett's and the Labanis and the Burtons and all those guys really didn't start being factors till 5 years in.
Yeah.
The only 2 guys were Dale Sr. and Jeff Gordon, and they started winning in their 2nd years.
Yeah.
And so they were truly phenomenal in that regard. But almost every other guy, you had to learn what the car wanted and what how the races evolved and so forth. Now, and you saw it, the first time I saw it the other way, I think was maybe with either Kyle Busch or Denny Hamlin, and you had guys that had no races.
Yeah.
And they'd come in and they'd
Be right on
they'd
pace.
be on pace right away. Well, as the engineering came in, that component of what the driver used to be responsible for was now being handled by someone else.
Yeah.
And the cars it was more just get in and gas it up.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't like to compare eras in terms of one's harder, one's the other. They're just different, and it's hard in any era to be better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And so it takes different things at different times. So that's one way that's changed a lot. I really don't like their latest tweak to the chase. I said it last year, and I said it more recently. It really is coming down to kind of a coin flip. I said the championship in a lot of years is going to be a restart. The whole championship is going to be a restart.
Yeah. I can
And
see
so, I get why they did it, but the chase I thought was a good development.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at all the years of the chase, almost every year was pretty damn compelling.
It always went down.
Yeah.
a lot,
And it
absolutely.
really,
Yeah.
and even if there was there was just real tension. Last year, I didn't even watch the end.
Really?
I didn't care.
Yeah.
It was like because it
'Cause
wasn't
like it's kind of like a basketball game where it really comes down to the last 2 minutes no matter what. So.
Yeah, well, and it
It's a
just
2-point break.
and it really was, it was almost like musical chairs, and so I just,
Yeah.
I wanted to care, but I
Yeah.
didn't,
Yeah.
and so I think they've gone too far. And what's going to happen is they're going to have a couple. They're going to have some really unsatisfying champions,
Yeah.
and they look at the other sports and they're not appreciating what's different about this sport than any other sport.
Yeah, right.
And so they forget that there are total dud Super Bowls. There are total dud NBA finals. They're just you can't. There's dud, and golf is a great example. Golf, like the majors, build over 4 days. And sometimes the guy's got a 6-stroke lead, and he strolls up to the 18th waving. And it's just part of how it's just what's unique about
that's what
golf.
this year
And
is.
so
Yeah, exactly.
they're going to have to. I think they're going to have to
Accept
undo that.
Yeah.
Or they're
Well-
or they're going to the reason they do it is
Yeah.
gone.
Well, and like you said, I wonder if that's part of the noise kind of confusing the
Yep.
message a little bit.
Yep.
Everybody's like, oh, this was a boring year. It's like, well, okay, let's change the entire system because of
Yep.
it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
did you have any run-ins with Earnhardt because you guys had a bunch of good races on the road courses?
We didn't have any run-ins, and partially because he was kind of involved in my.
So he was actually that guy
in
then.
my program.
Okay.
Yeah. He. I mean, I think some of this came out after he died, but he worked really hard to help young guys until they kind of had their feet under them, and then it was like pushed them out of the nest.
Yeah.
Right.
And even when he was helping me, there was one of these. You knew on the racetrack, it was like,
No,
no.
get out of here.
And so, but he did something for me early on. This was in 1990. I'd done a couple races for a West Coast guy, and done well in that car. I got to drive a Hendrick R&D car at the Glen in '89, and I led towards the end of that race, and then cut a tire when I was taking the lead, banging with Michael Waltrip, had a flat, and so forth. But kind of put me on the radar. Chevy put a deal together the next year. It was a 4-race Cup and 1 race nationwide. It was Cup and Busch back then, or
Yeah.
Winston and Busch. But and Dale Sr. oversaw it for
Oh.
Chevy, and so it was Dale's Tony Uri Sr. and all those guys crewed the car, his nationwide team, and they oversaw the car. And he was checking on the car every day at the shop and so forth, and really took me under his wing. And we got to Sears for the drivers' meeting. And back then, the drivers' meeting was just everyone gathered around the hauler.
Yeah.
And he used
By
to,
the way, not the mall, Sonoma Raceway.
yeah.
Okay, we went to Sears about pants, refrigerators.
Sears Point.
Right.
Thank God I never switched to that other name because it's gone now.
Yeah, exactly.
And right before, and how old was I? I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I was doing well in my deal, but this, nervous, out of my element.
Yeah. Right.
And right before the meeting starts, Earnhardt yells my name. He says, "Kendall," and he waves, and he made me come up to the very front and sit with him on the stairs of the hauler.
Oh.
And it was almost like he was telling everyone, "Hey,
my guy.
This is my guy.
he's with me," you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And it was really subtle, and so I got no trouble from any of the regulars, the main guys. It was the mid pack sort of
Yeah. Sure.
squirrels
That should be
that
my
I had some
job.
issues with. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So he was talk about badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the only guy that could maybe be a fair fight with El Gallo.
yeah. Should put a 3 on the side of it just to like tie it up.
He would
Yeah.
he would not understand El Gallo. I remember when the sunglass game started changing, and Spy was coming on, and I was wearing these different glasses. I showed up for the IROC race at Daytona once, and he, Mr. Gargoyle, he had his gargoyles on, and we're in the picture, and he has that vice grip on your
Like on-
neck.
yeah.
He just gives you on the neck, and he's like, "Them are some f***ed up glasses, boy."
That's fantastic. So you run around with Paul Tracy quite a bit. Did that friendship start when you were doing Champ Car commentary, or was that something previous from being racers?
It actually started. It predated that by a good bit. We met when I first kind of got to know him, as we were both in rehab, mending bones. Yeah, different rehab.
whoa, hold on.
hurt my nose.
In Indy, when I was recovering from the GTB crash, he
Yeah.
had just broken his leg at Michigan in one of his early races for
Yeah.
Penske.
Yep.
And so he was there, and he was, talking just painfully shy and quiet. And so I got to know him then and really didn't see him a lot. I had some mutual friends, a guy from California, this funny guy I carted with, was a total kook. Anyway,
Is that Howie?
no,
Oh.
not Howie. This guy named Mike Berg.
Yeah.
Mike Berg. And so they were friends for a while. And so, but then when I started commentating in '98, I started, doing, being around him a fair amount. And there was one of those races. He was married to his second wife, Lisa, at the time. And I go to the Team Cool Green hired me to host this event one night for their hospitality. And I show up and I'm doing this, that, and then I go to eat afterwards and I bump into his wife, who I'd never met. And she looks at me, she goes, "You're the guy who says all that mean stuff about my husband." And I'm like, I said, well, it's one way to look at it. I said, I look at it as I'm the guy who talks about all the stupid shit your husband does on TV. is what I said to her. And so I purposely sat with them. And then
fraud.
she started saying, and then she was going off a little bit, and Paul's just sitting there kind of laughing. And that's one thing about him. He's really able to poke fun at himself and actually be pretty introspective about
So we
some
could
of the
hang
stupid
then.
stuff. Yeah. But so she eventually warmed up. She goes, well, actually, I really like your style. You crack me up, except when you're talking about him. I'm like, listen, I don't make the stuff up. I said, I like the guy. She goes, well, just don't say anything more mean. That was the weekend that he got into the shoving match with Barry Green.
Oh,
And so I'm like, game on.
Yeah.
PT called me once and says, hey, I mean, if you're on his call list, it's 10 times a day. So,
Really?
But he calls me and he goes, hey, go to YouTube, go check this out. Some guy did a music video with all my crashes. And I'm like, okay. And so I go and he goes, what do you think? I said it's cool, but I said that's not all your crashes. If it was all your crashes, it'd be a feature-length movie.
Right.
And he's like, you're right.
It's like The Wall.
So there's a handful of drivers you seem to really get along with well. There's PT. Jimmy Johnson's kind of in your little posse. Brian Vickers. Who's the character we don't know about?
Who's the character you don't know about? I mean, Vickers and I spend the most time together. You know, we've become very close friends.
How'd you guys get to know each other?
I got to know him originally. Actually, I guess it was in Vegas with Vassar. He was out once when he was like 19,
Sure.
hanging on to the crew, and then through Jimmy, I went to the Homestead finale one year and I stayed on Jeff Gordon's boat, and they were all staying on Rick's boat right next door.
Right.
And so, played some poker with him. And one thing about Brian is the most remarkable. He stays in meaningful contact with more people than anyone I've ever met.
Sure.
And it's not like just in a casual way. Once you meet him, and like when he comes to town, a lot of the people I introduced him to in LA, he'll have dinner and stuff with them totally independent of me. And the thing is, he's like really curious. He reads a lot. He just likes being around interesting and smart people. And so I'm not great at reaching out to people, I mean, I'm outgoing, but like I'm happy just kind of doing my own thing. And so it's not that I don't want to, but I'm always busy with something.
Right.
And so he was the one that kind of cultivated. He's like, hey, I'm in town, let's meet up. And then pretty soon you're really, really good friends.
Yeah.
It's kind of how that works. And so, I mean, in terms of, let's see, I guess, and it kind of ebbs and flows. Like PT, I met him when I was in my accident, but I didn't really. And it's you kind of coming in and out of people's lives,
Right.
and so and PT and I we had a big falling out at one point and didn't talk for a couple years, and then it patched up eventually. And so I mean those are kind of the main guys. I mean I get along with almost everyone.
Yeah.
And
You don't have to get into it. What was that?
that was. It was.
You don't have to get into it. If you don't
Yeah,
want.
it was kind of weird. It was. I won't get into the nuts and bolts of it. I think he was having a tough time as coming to grips with his career ending,
Okay.
and it didn't really.
So this was just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't end on. And so the blow up was a stupid thing, but he's kind of caustic, as we've seen, and so. And I used to always just kind of, it didn't affect me, and so I'd kind of hold a mirror up and I'd blow holes in some of his rants about other people and so forth, just kind of for fun.
Yeah.
And then and to try to help him out,
Yeah.
in a different point of view. And then he just got really nasty with me personally about something. He took something the wrong way about a tweet I did.
Yeah.
And he said, "I hope you're kidding." I'm like, "No."
Right.
And then it just devolved from there, and it turned in. So it got. And I said, "Listen," I said,
So it was a Twitter-based drama.
it was a Twitter-based drama about me kind of offering congratulations to another driver that got a deal.
Right.
And I said, "Congratulations."
Okay. And it
And-
got misread.
Well, no, it just it just showed where he was coming from.
Yeah.
And he says, "How can you say they're more deserving than me?" I said, "Go reread that."
Yeah.
And so
No, I get
he
that
was
when-
having a tough time,
Right,
and
yeah.
so that that's a little bit TMI, but it was he went through a period I think where he kind of a lot of his good friends he just was really having a tough time,
Yeah.
and he kind of blew them all up.
Yeah.
I think he's sort of is back with all of his friends kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what changed? I didn't hear from him, and then the day after Dan Weldon was killed, I got a text like nothing had ever changed. And so he was really hurting
Yeah.
after that.
Sure.
And he just reached out. And
Wow.
he has a hard time saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that.
And so, and so I just, and so we kind of picked up where we left
Yeah.
off.
I get that.
Yeah.
I certainly have my dark days where if I see somebody's like got a new job or something on Facebook,
Yeah.
what I don't understand is why they have to write "F you, Heckman." You
Right.
know?
Why do they always write that?
I don't know why they always have
it's
to
like
write that
people
on
don't
there.
even know, and it's just filled with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like every time I posted a picture of you, it's all these people that are like looking for money.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
yeah, it's really
So
strange.
it may have something to
Yeah.
do with state of mind. I get that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things about PT. I think he's one of the most fascinating personalities I've ever
Absolutely.
been around.
Yeah.
And the talent, and he doesn't get enough credit for it. It was really a shame that he didn't get a proper farewell.
Right.
With weight being as important as it is, before they equalized the driver weights in IndyCar, which was I think 2003, he'd won 19 races, spotting people 50
Yeah.
to 80 pounds.
Yeah.
And the guy was just fearless.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't really. His wife said to me once, he goes, God, he's totally different than when he's out of the car. He said he's not afraid. I said he's afraid. I said, but he's more afraid of looking bad
Yeah.
than he is of dying.
Afraid of letting his ego down.
And so, that's all of us.
Yeah.
That's why do you do something that's so dangerous? And
Yeah.
there's a bigger reason. Most drivers are afraid. On some level,
Yeah,
but
sure.
there's something else driving them. So so PT is just one of the more fascinating creatures that sounds stupid. One of the more fascinating people I've been around, and I think, and that's kind of one of the things that's wrong with racing is the personality. He learned. And he wasn't able to keep it bottled up, thank God, because that's why he was so compelling to watch. He's an interesting guy.
So who do you want to punch in the face?
Who do I want to punch in the face? Back when I was driving, it was always Scott Pruitt. For the most part.
Okay.
Pruitt.
We hear the same names consistently is what I find interesting.
Yeah.
Which I
Yeah.
bet you when we ask Pruitt, he's gonna be like Lally and
Lally,
Tommy
Kendall.
Yeah.
Now you
the
guys.
thing about Pruitt, it was a different era in that there was no policing of blocking back then.
Right.
Which was Trans Am?
Trans Am,
Yeah.
mostly Trans Am.
Because he had that
yeah.
1 or 2 year stint, right? Back in the mid.
Yeah, we only overlapped. It was 1 year, 94,
94.
94 Trans Am, and so, it was mixed with respect because basically there was no policing of blocking. So it was always if there was contact, it was always the overtaking guy's fault, and so. With Pruitt, he was so subtle and so good. Sometimes in a 100-mile race, you'd only get 2 runs on that guy.
Yeah.
And so, and if you were good at it, and it would just make you crazy.
Yeah.
Because and so one of the early races, it was Portland, and I had gotten into it with fellows on a similar incident for the win at Mid Ohio and got it taken away actually, and so. We got to Portland, the driver's meeting. I said, what's the rule here? How are we going to do this? Is it anything goes? Can you block? I said, I personally think it's a little bit kind of like politics almost. Let me know the rules, and I'll race to the rules.
Yeah.
I have an opinion on what the best rules are, but at the end of the day, I just need to know what the rules are.
Yeah.
And so back then, everybody was sort of. I won Miami, I won that one, and got it taken away. And so, there was. People were a little bit stirred up, and so they said, "You can't just keep running into people." I said, I don't just, obviously there's 2 sides to every story, but they said it's overtaking guy responsibility. I said 100%. They're like, yeah, if you're a guy in front can do what he wants. I said, really? Is that really what we want here? I said, and they said, yeah, that's it. I said, okay. I said, I don't know if you guys have noticed. I said, I qualify up front row 80% of the time. I said, so if that's the rule, I'm okay with that. I don't think we should race that way, but if that's the rule, let's go.
Right.
And they're like, that's the rule. That race, I started, I think, second. Pruitt had a run on me on the start, squeezed him over against the pit wall.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I did it, all race. One little squeeze, he came up after me furious. I said, what do you think that whole talk about the driver's meeting was?
Yeah, right.
And he says, well, that's different. I said, the only difference is you're behind me instead of in front of me. And I said, that's why I asked. I said, let's get the rules. And
Yeah.
so, and he genuinely didn't get it. He genuinely thought it was different. So I mean, that's the great thing about racers is we're so egocentric. It's only
totally see that.
and he goes, well, that's dangerous. I said,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, well, my advice to you is if you're scared, get a dog.
Right.
So fast forward, Scott and I are good friends now. I have mad respect for him. The thing about Scott is he was a machine, and he drives so hard.
Yeah.
He makes very few mistakes. He never beat himself. You always had to beat him.
Yeah.
And then you add that little component about how good he was with the carve, and it was subtle.
Yeah.
And then afterwards he'd always just play the innocent. He's like, I don't know what he's talking about. And you're going cuckoo with the official, and he's like,
I don't know his
I
problem
didn't do
is.
that.
Yeah.
So
You look at how long he's been racing. I mean, he's 55 or something this year.
he's 55.
And he's got his pick of the litter on GT or DP rides for the 24 hours. Ganassi's guy.
He will go down as the most decorated, the most successful sports car driver in history. I mean, he might not get the overall numbers at Daytona ultimately, but you look at, just excellence and he got a late start because he didn't have any money. Bruce Jenner, Caitlin, gave him his big break, getting him into that ride.
Right.
Bridgestone gave him his first break into a GTU car, and then Jenner and Roush after that. But he didn't get into a big car till he was 28.
No.
So,
Do you guys make fun of his interviews in the booth?
we don't in the booth. Everyone laughs, but I actually in my last interview as a factory racer at Pt.1, I said,
did it.
I said I gotta say hi to Scott Pruitt's family at home.
You win.
He's like in the other booth. He's like, Kendall.
He wins again.
He's like Miami, and now this. He's like keeping tabs.
Yeah. No, my anger was partially fueled by
Being
was
competitive.
respect,
Yeah.
and he was just so good. And he's as productive away from the racetrack. He promotes himself all those tractors and forklifts and stuff, and he just builds it. He's at home, and now we're gonna build a barn, and he's just the guy is a machine.
Okay, random topic, but you may disagree with this statement, but I would argue you were a big part of what made Danica Patrick's career early on. With the pro celebrity race and all the antics that came with it, most people didn't know who she was at that point. You think that's true?
I think I don't know. She thanked me at her wedding. She said, "You really saw all this before anyone else did, and really helped." So I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
Good wedding. Good food.
The wedding was good. Yes, food was good.
Decent band.
Yeah. Yep.
Good.
So
She learned for the next one.
yeah, it was one of these things. It was I was one of the first guys on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
I was the first guy whose ego got crushed by her.
Yeah, well, because you guys had the PR folklore. You guys had a bet, right?
Yep.
That you guys were racing the pro celebrity race. She was this random girl out of did the Formula Ford Festival in Europe and whatnot, but really wasn't a known name out here.
Yep.
And so she runs this pro celebrity race against the great Tommy Kendall. And so she was obviously fast in practice. So you guys made a bet that whoever lost would be carried around on a leash from the other one, correct?
Yeah. Well, the build-ups this was, to set the scene, I had stopped racing after the 97 season where I'd won 11 in a row, kind of going out on top, drop the mic out. Yeah. And then I was doing the TV with Fox, and so they promoted, to do the celeb race. So they called me, and I'd been away from it, but I was still, everyone likes to win. So first thing I asked is, who's in this? Who are the pros? Yeah. And they told me, and I was like, okay. And they said, Danica Patrick. I'm like, I said, I don't really know much about her, but I do know she finished second in the festival. Yeah. And that matched the best ever finished by an American, which was Danny Sullivan at that point. Yeah. And now Americans have won. So in the so I'm like, she's obviously, got some skills, legit. And so my only question is, how big is she? Because I'm thinking we're in spec cars, 180 horsepower.
Yeah.
I'd put on some LBs. I I'm even bigger now, but I was about 220,
Yeah.
and so I immediately started on a hunger strike for about 4 weeks. I get to the practice day, and that's one of the cool things that Toyota does. They make even the pros. You have to go to the training,
Yeah.
and when you're a pro, you're like, this is stupid,
Right.
but it's part of why you have the chemistry with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
celebs and the relationships and the camaraderie, and so it's really genius what they do. But so I go there, and it's Willow Springs. It was chilly. I get out there, and I see there's this big Land Cruiser, and Keith Crane is the sort of the media celeb that year, and so I know Keith. Keith's in this Land Cruiser, and I said, I'm going to get it, and there's this pretty girl in the passenger seat. I'm like, it's obviously Keith's daughter. I said, I'm going to go in here. I said, I'm going to get warmed up. I'm going to hit on Keith's daughter. I'm going to
Really get him
I
going.
get in the car. I introduce myself, and I get the famed Danica vice grip handshake.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Danica. I'm like, oh, because she's tiny.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, here we go. So all the way through that practice, faster. First practice at Long Beach, faster, but getting closer all the way, getting
Yeah.
closer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the trend is not good.
Right.
And so we get to qualifying, and she pips me like by a tenth, and I'm like, ugh. And so I'm thinking, part of it was just I like to have a good time, and but so part of it is I like, let's see if we can kind of upset the apple cart here a little bit. So, and even though that's a fun race, everyone's got their game faces on,
Oh, yeah.
especially
Yeah,
the
they
pros,
still wanna win.
and so we haven't really hung out at all. Everyone's kind of sizing each other up. So the drivers' meeting, I said, hey, Danica, I said, why don't we put a bet on top of this to put some real stakes in this deal? She's like, okay, what do you have in mind? I said, well, I said, how about the loser gets led on a leash to the IndyCar paddock tomorrow morning? She goes, you're on. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I'm thinking, I gotta beat her to turn one. I gotta beat her to turn one. If I don't beat her to turn one, I said, I'm cooked.
Yeah.
And so I did not beat her to turn one. And so, but I actually got close to her, and she made a couple mistakes, and I actually got next to her, where the big World Challenge crash was this year, leaving the left-hander, heading for the right-hander.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got up next to her on the left, and she started coming over, and I'm like, here we go. One of
Right.
my favorite things in racing is when you can wreck somebody else and have it be their fault.
And it's their fault. Yeah,
It's their fault.
Absolutely.
And so
you're ready to
here
hook
she
her.
comes over, and I'm ready to hook her, and I left it. I let her off the hook. And to this day, I'm like, why did I do that? And I don't know if it was like I hadn't raced for 4 years.
Because
and I
it's
was a hair
the
soft.
pro celebrity race.
Yeah.
No. I wrecked the shit out of Jack Brabham for the exact same thing when I did the race in '97. Thankfully, I didn't hurt him afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, that guy's 70, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, and when I saw him at the dinner that night, he's like, I'm surprised it took you that long. but so, I don't know if it's the don't hit a girl. I
Or
don't.
was there like a voice like this is her career? Like,
No,
like
no.
Jack
He's
Brabham,
like,
that's not true.
racers, we don't care about that. I think it was don't hit a girl. I think it was under no circumstances are you allowed to hit a girl. I think it was that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I let her off, and I never got another shot. She wins. So we go to the banquet. Now we start. Everyone's having a
thing.
good time.
Right,
We're chit chatting. Everyone's having fun. So then the next day we show up for the thing, and she's like, you don't have to do this. She goes, I don't want to humiliate you. It's funny and all, but you don't have to do this. I said, oh no.
Because you would have done it to her.
Well, that's
Oh,
exactly
yeah.
what I said. I
Oh,
said, deal's a deal. And if you lost, you would be doing this in a Catwoman suit. I had a Catwoman. I had this killer
had it ready.
Catwoman suit for her to do it in. And so I did it. And I knew it would be good for her. I knew it would
Absolutely.
be good for me or
Yeah.
whatever, per se.
Yeah.
So.
And the rest is history.
And now she's a sprint cup driver.
Yeah.
Yes. And so actually, there's some other
Nothing else
Danica
happened.
things that I introduced her at Cleveland. I think it was that year. She signed with Rahal not that long after that. I think she did Barber Dodge the first.
She was in Barber Dodge that year.
Yeah, and so I wanted to introduce her to Tiger Woods' agent.
Yeah.
Mark Steinberg, and so he was going to be there. IMG was based in Cleveland, and so and I wanted her to go with a non-racing. It might have been a little because she asked me if I would be her manager, and I said no. I said you need someone that
Because
thinks
in that
about
business,
that's doing this. Well, if I was willing to do nothing but think about that,
Yeah.
I could have done a good job for her. But I said you need someone that is only thinking about you. But I said I would go with a non-racing manager, kind of big pop, and so I thought of Mark, who I knew, and so I introduced, I told Mark, I said, listen, Danica is going to be a transcendent athlete.
Yeah.
She's way bigger than this deal, and she's going to be a huge breakout star. And so I introduced them, and neither of them got it. Nothing ever. And so they didn't
I
do
wonder if he's
anything.
kicking himself now.
Well, I saw him at my brother's wedding, and he goes, I know. and they ended up. She signed with them.
Oh, really?
About
Later on.
5 years ago.
Okay.
About 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, but so that was one thing. And I just I just thought that I knew she had a shot at kind of going. And so part of it was the thing that she gets heat for is she's like a lot of females, and I get a lot of them and a lot of racers, you're shooting for respectability. She had no interest in respectability. She wanted to win.
Yeah.
And so, and people, one of the big knocks against her, she gets all this publicity. I said, that's not her fault.
Yeah.
And she really hasn't cultivated it that much. Her sponsors have. But I said, she wants to win.
Yeah.
And I said, and that's the one thing that actually might make her be able to, and she won an IndyCar race both after they equalized the weight.
Yep.
Actually. So anyways, so I was a big fan, and I shoot it straight. I'm also a critic, about certain aspects.
I believe
so forth.
you labeled her as a Princess Sparkle Horse.
Princess Sparkle Pony, yeah.
Sparkle Pony.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, I used to tell her, I said, Danica, why don't you smile? I said, you got a beautiful smile. I said, why don't you smile? She goes, it's not intimidating. And I said to her, I said, I got news for you, hon. I said,
You're 5'6".
Exactly. You're 5'2".
Right.
Yeah.
And
right.
I said, you can give me the meanest stare you want, and I'm not
You're gonna
intimidated.
laugh.
I
Yeah.
said, if you get out of the car and you're 2/10 faster than me and you're twisting your ponytails and giggling,
Yeah.
I'm going to be totally
I would be so
scared.
mind-fucked. Yeah.
And so, thankfully, she smiles now, and
Yeah.
she's having I think, obviously maturity. She's figured some of that out, but she's an intense competitor.
We sat down with both Catherine Legge and Sarah Fisher, who are kind of women who never went down the FHM photo spread route, things like that. It's obviously worked for Danica. Where do you stand on that kind of stuff when we start seeing more and more female drivers come to the sport and some are posing selfies of themselves and bikini pics and the whole thing?
Well, I mean, Danica actually regretted that right afterwards,
Yeah.
and I think it was one of the better things that ever happened to her
Sure,
career-wise. So, it's kind of, again, the market's never wrong. Back to my adage, it's to each their own. But sex sells. Guys like hot chicks, and guys are the most of the fans of racing. So there's no right and there's no wrong, but there are consequences. One of the consequences of that is you're gonna, if you go that road, you're probably gonna get depending on how it's done. If it's done well and you've got the ability, it's gonna help your career.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get tons of shit for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's you can't have it both ways. You can't have everyone look up to you universally and say, oh my gosh, she's a great role model. Some people will always say if you do that, you're cheap, you're sleazy, you're this, it's a little bit of slut shaming, I guess, the whole thing, which is bullshit. So.
I'm finished.
Hey everyone, it's Sean here. It may sound like that is the end of the episode. It is in fact not. That's why the ending came a little bit abrupt. Our interview with Tommy was one of the more extended ones, so we decided to break this up into 2 episodes just to give you a little bit of an intermission. So we're going to end this one here. We're going to play you out with a return of The Blue Hours, which features Teresa Calpatura, who, if you're not familiar with her, she was also a big part of the Magnus Racing Rediscover Sports Car video. So we will come right back with part 2 of Tommy Kendall. Enjoy.